Hi YouTube! Today, if you can't tell from my setting, we're going to talk about something that is very near and dear to me. That is the human centipede. Now, I know what you're thinking. Frank, you've talked about the human centipede twice already. Can you shut up? No, I can't shut up. And also, this is a special occasion because I'm not just talking about the human centipede, I'm talking about the movie Centipede. Now, uh, Human Centipede and Tom Six fans alike uh, might already know what this is. But basically, to brief those who don't know, it is all three of the Human Centipede movies on a Blu-ray Steelbook. Now, I want to talk about this because I just recently had the pleasure of viewing the movie Centipede, all 4.5 hours of it, and I wanted to talk about it. So I made a little breakdown of what I'll be talking about today. So first we're going to talk about the disc itself, which is this, and then we're going to talk about the plot of the first movie, and then the mood and vibe of it, and why I like it. And then we're going to go back around and do that for the other two films, respectively. And then I'll give my rating of each film out of 5, and then potentially, if it makes sense, I will give my rating of the movie Centipede as a whole. And then at the very end, we're going to talk about the Conceptual Centipede, which might not make sense right now, but I promise it will. So we're going to start with the disc. And I'm drinking my tea out of my handmade human centipede cup. I thought that it would be fitting for this. So without further ado, the movie Centipede. This past Sunday, I watched all of it. I'll get to that. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm just so excited to talk about this. So the movie Centipede Steelbook was released by Tom Six himself. So it's a steelbook. If you've owned a steelbook, you know what that is. And if you don't, it's a Blu-ray case that's made of steel. It's a metal Blu-ray case. Now, what I particularly like about this is this background texture that covers the entirety of the steelbook, that being a really low resolution feces. And it's all over it, which I really quite like. And as you can see, there's the centipede. It says uncut limited edition, the human centipede complete sequence, which it doesn't say that on any of the other films. It says first sequence, full sequence, and final sequence. And then it says the movie Centipede. And then it says the Tom Six edition. 100% Tom Six approved, and in yellow, warning, these films may suppress appetite, cause uncontrollable anxiety attacks, premature ejaculation, and most common constipation. You'll note that the punctuation is not correct on the most common constipation. There's no comma or anything. And then on the back, it's much of the same, and it has some reviews. Quote, I honestly got sick, and that's the highest compliment I can give a horror film, from Eli Roth upon viewing the Human Centipede first sequence. The second quote says, the grossest movie ever made, but also kind of likable and charming, by Bret Easton Ellis about the Human Centipede 2 full sequence. And then the last quote on here is, quote, the Human Centipede trilogy is a real anal delight. All other challengers to most shocking midnight movie of the year pale in comparison. John Waters, about all of them, the trilogy. And I would have to agree. And so, yeah, that's the outside. And upon opening it, you get this lovely booklet that's got a bunch of supplementary materials. You can pause it and read it if you'd like. There's Tom Six himself. He's really cool. He calls him he calls himself the Pope of Filth. And yeah, it is the exact same print on this booklet as it is on the cover of the steelbook. It's just kind of compressed in a strange way. And then on the inside, we have the 2 discs. And now you're like, 2 discs? Is it that long? It is 4.5 hours long, but no. The first disc has the movie Centipede. The second disc has the Human Centipede 2 in color, because if you've seen it, you know it's in black and white. And then it's got a behind the scenes of all 3 of them, some deleted scenes, Decaying in Style, which is like a home video that Tom Six made, and then a promotion for his painting website, which I really want to buy one of his paintings, but they're really expensive, so I don't think I really will ever be able to. So yeah, that's the steelbook. It's really cool. It's really nicely made. And when you put the DVD in, this crusty poop texture is the thing, the home menu, with some like really poorly cut out PNGs of the characters from the movies. So I'm going to let that sit up there so that it can accompany us while I talk about them. So I'm not sure if I'm going to edit in any like video or images into this. It all depends on how I feel. But first, we're just going to dive right in to the plot of the Human Centipede 1, the Human Centipede first sequence. So this one I think a lot of people are familiar with. 2 girls are on a European vacation. They just left Holland and now they're in Germany, and they're going to a party to meet a cute German waiter. And on their way there, they get a flat tire, and then they start freaking out, and a dirty man in a car comes and starts saying really dirty things to them, and they proceed to be uncomfortable and ignore him until he leaves. And then they start walking because they have a flat tire, walking in the woods and not on the road. And they start freaking out, and then it starts raining, and they see a house, and then it starts raining as they're approaching the house, and they knock. I forgot to tell you how the movie opens. It opens on the highway, and the titular Dr. Josef Heiter is in his car, and he has a tranquilizer gun, and he tranquilizes a trucker that pulls over on the side of the road to use the bathroom. And then we cut to the girls. So they approach the house, and we find out it's the house of the man who was in the car at the beginning, who was looking at a picture of 3 Rottweilers that were like mouth to butt, not unlike the Human Centipede. And of course, they ask him for help, and he's like, yeah, but he's really weird, and then he drugs them, and they wake up in the basement of his home, of which you never really get the proper layout of, because every single shot in this movie is a medium close-up or a close-up. So chaos ensues. He explains the Human Centipede to them. He used to be, the Dr. Josef Heiter used to be famous for separating Siamese twins, and all he's ever wanted to do was make twins or triplets, etc., etc. So he explains it to the 2 girls and a Japanese man who he later kidnaps. And then, before the operation to make the centipede, one of the girls tries to escape. She is unsuccessful. And then the centipede is made. And the second half of the movie is just watching these poor people have to exist as a centipede. It's not gory, really. I think the goriest thing about this film is during the escape sequence, when the Lindsay is trying to escape, and she runs away, and the IV that is in her arm gets ripped out, and she bleeds everywhere. So yeah, it's not a gory film, and a lot of people say they're disappointed in it. They're wrong. Anyways, so the movie goes, and they're the centipede, and it's funny to watch. And then the police show up to Dr. Heiter's home, and they're like, "We heard a woman screaming on your property." And he's like, "No, you didn't." And eventually, they get really suspicious of him, and they go to get a search warrant, and they come back. Um, the centipede tries to escape, and they're unsuccessful. The Japanese man is the head of the centipede, and he slits his throat, spouting a bunch of stuff about how he's a failure and just a bug. And then the girl in the back dies because she had an infection, so leaving Lindsay in the middle. And then the police come back. Heiter kills one of them, and then when the other one finds him, he kills Heiter, but Heiter also kills him. So everybody is dead except for Lindsay in the middle of the centipede. And the camera pans out while she's crying up above the house, and then the credits play. There's a lot of things I could say about it conceptually, but that's not part of it yet. So the mood and the vibe of this film is not unlike any other B movie horror film that you may have seen. It's a lot like Hostel. Knock Knock with Keanu Reeves similarly harkens to the trope of two women showing up at a door. It's very normal, and it's not gory, and you're like, wow, for a concept like that, this was really underwhelming. That is because Tom Six was not going to be given the funding to make this film if he didn't play it straight. So it is played very safely when compared to the other two. So yeah. It's very cold and clinical. The acting is kind of funny. It's really overacted in a kind of corny but charming way. It's very green, I would describe it as. It's a green movie. The color of the movie is green. And I would prescribe a color to each film, respectively, and I will as we go on. And it's just interesting. Yeah, so why I like it is I have a deep sentimental attachment to it and the second film. When I was 11 years old and I had a Netflix account. Well, my parents had a Netflix account. Both of the first two Human Centipede films were on Netflix, and I watched them back to back in the same day. And that is the event that changed the trajectory of my life forever. And I've talked about this cathartic moment in artist talks before too. I would not be the painter that I am today without these films. I think a lot of why I like it is this nostalgia and this like debt that I owe to the Human Centipede and by extension Tom Six. And I also just think it's a very cozy movie for me. I know every beat of it. I remember every line. I can quote it a lot. I'll save you the displeasure of seeing that right now, but just believe me. And I think I just find a lot of comfort in that repetition, that knowing that, yeah. And it's gross and weird. And I like gross and weird things, as you're aware if you've been a subscriber of this channel. Yeah, so that's why I like it, and I think it's great. And so, yeah, now we move on to the Human Centipede 2 full sequence. So, and you're going to notice this as a pattern. Um, the the beginning of the second movie is the ending of the first movie. So you start the film and you're like, interesting. It's just the ending of the last movie, but it's in black and white. But then it cuts a little bit during the credits, and it's being played on like a crappy computer screen, and it pans out to a fat middle-aged man watching it, and you're like, whoa, he looks kind of gross and weird. I'm gonna be totally frank and honest with you. um, the second one is my favorite, not by much, but it is my favorite, and I think because it hits all the beats of what I enjoy aesthetically in the media that I consume. So much so that there was a painting of that weird fat middle aged man in my undergraduate thesis exhibition. So, um, yeah, so you have this fat middle aged man, and you find out he's a security guard, and there's these two people fighting in the parking garage that he is a security guard for, and he goes out, and it's a man and a woman. They're a couple, and the man starts yelling at him and calling him all kinds of insensitive words that would describe what we now say as a little person, even though he's not actually a little person. He's just a middle-aged man who is about I think he's 4'6". He's short, but he's not a little person. um, and then he's looking at the girlfriend, Martin, the middle-aged man, and then her boyfriend starts yelling at him and says, like, you don't even look at my girlfriend, you fat wanker. It's British. This movie's British, by the way. um, and then he shoots him in the foot, and he kidnaps the two of them. He puts them in the back of his van, and then he goes back to his office, and then he rewinds the Human Centipede movie and starts watching it again. And you start to get a sense that Martin really likes the Human Centipede. And I'm not going to touch on this quite yet because we're not at the Conceptual Centipede yet, but it is. I think it's safe to assume that Martin is coded as being autistic, and his special interest is the Human Centipede. Um, so you then find out he lives with his mom, and you also find out that his father's in prison for sexually abusing him, and his mother resents him for that. He also struggles with incontinence. He shits himself a lot, and he has a pet centipede. And his therapist also expresses a very obvious, deep-seated desire to also sexually abuse him. The R word is used a lot in this movie, I will also say. This movie is a lot more grotesque and over the top than the first one. It is, I think, when people hear the Human Centipede, this is what they're expecting more so than the first one. So the whole first half of the film is Martin going about his life and slowly um, collecting people to make his centipede. The only difference is he's not a surgeon, and he's doing it in a warehouse rather than a basement that is decked out to be like a surgical, medical, whatever. So a little less than halfway through the film, Martin has this book where he draws and writes about how much he loves the human centipede. He's mute, by the way, and writes about how he wants to make his own and everything. And he keeps it stuffed under his mattress. And nothing ever seems to be going Martin's way. His mom hates him. The fat guy that lives upstairs comes down and like beats the crap out of him sometimes, and etc. He has no friends. You know, the human centipede is all he has. Um, and so one day his mom finds that book under his bed and goes, "Is this a perverted film you've been talking about?" And then she rips up the book, and he gets really upset. And he goes into the living room to feed his centipede, his pet centipede, in a tank. And his mom comes out and goes, "I want this stuff out of my house." And then he grabs her by the head and like shoves her head into the centipede tank, and the centipede bites her face, and she starts screaming. And then he comes in with a crowbar and starts beating her to death with the crowbar until her head is caved in like an unidentifiable mess, which I have also done a painting of. I've done a few paintings from this film. I've done a painting of his dead mother, as well as a painting of the centipede from this film. So he kills his mom, sits her up at the kitchen, and then taps on the ceiling to annoy the man upstairs that beats him up sometimes when he plays his music really loud. And the man comes down and he goes, "Fuck!" And then Martin not kills him, bangs him on the head with a crowbar and knocks him out. And now the centipede is about to begin. So he starts packing his tools to create the centipede, which is like shed tools and kitchen knives and cooking implements. You know, nothing good for surgery, because he doesn't know what he's doing. Um, and what has been set up for the whole first half of the film is that he was desperately trying to get into contact with one, if not all, of the actors from the first Human Centipede to get them so he could kidnap them and put them in his centipede. And only one of them calls him back, and it's the girl that was the back of the centipede, Jenny, who's the name of the actress I am blanking on because I am a fake fan, seemingly. I'm not. I just don't remember her name right now. So after he kills his mom and kidnaps the neighbor from upstairs, he gets in his van and he goes to pick her up, the actress, and brings her to his warehouse. And she's like, "I'm so excited to audition for this Quentin Tarantino film," because that's what he's managed to convince her of. I like a lot in this film. There's a lot of implication of Martin talking, but you're also supposed to believe that he's mute. His mother always says he's talking about a centipede with 12 people. It's implied that he's been calling people on the phone, lying about a Quentin Tarantino film so that he can coerce the other actors from where they're at to London so he can, put them in his centipede. You say a plot hole, I say it's just funny. Hi guys, sorry about that. My camera just died and I had to delete a bunch of stuff to make more room because I was talking a lot. And I have to talk a little quieter now because one of my roommates came home, so I might seem a little less enthused, but that's okay. Where was I? So Martin is about to make the centipede. He knocks out the actress and she falls to the floor. And his preferred method of anesthesia is to hit someone on the head with a crowbar and knock them unconscious. So he starts making the centipede, and it's gross. it's hard to watch. He's knocking people's teeth out with hammers. They're choking and gagging on their blood and saliva. He's cutting their kneecaps open with a knife and then cutting their tendons with a rusty pair of scissors, and he tries to cut the the butt cheeks to do the that thing, and one of the people bleeds to death. So then what he does is he just starts stapling their lips to the hole of the person he's putting them in front of. And of course, the actress from the first movie is the front of this centipede that is comprised of 12 people. And once he's done constructing it, he's happy. Martin is so happy. Something has finally gone his way. He is elated. And he wants to be just like the doctor from the first movie. He takes out a mirror and he's showing them their reflections in the centipede, and he's making them walk and stuff. But what he really wants to see is the centipede shit. He really wants to see that. So first he tries force feeding it with a tube. That doesn't work. And then very cartoonishly, he has a vial of laxative, liquid, it literally says to take it orally on the vial, but he takes a syringe and fills it up, and he injects it into the butt cheeks of each piece of the centipede, and it works, and it's really funny. Notably, I would compare the shitting portion of this one to that of Schindler's List. That being because if you've seen Schindler's List, it's got a very selective color palette. Most of the film is in black and white, other than some fire at some points and that iconic girl in the red coat. The girl in the red coat in the Human Centipede 2 is the shit. It is the only thing that's in color in this film. It is brown. So it shits, and it smells bad, so Martin throws up all over the place. But then he gets really turned on, because I don't think I mentioned that yet. He is sexually attracted to the centipede and frequently pleasures himself while watching the film. Often mutilating his genitals in the process. He's seen using sandpaper, notably earlier. So he gets really worked up, understandably. And he, for lack of a better word, rapes the centipede, but not before wrapping barbed wire around his penis. It's a brutal scene. It's brutal. And yeah, so he climaxes, and I would like to argue, again, maybe this would be more fitting for the Conceptual Centipede, but this is the climax of the film, because from here, everything goes downhill, and things no longer are going Martin's way. So he climaxes. The film climaxes, if you will. Earlier in the film, he had kidnapped a pregnant woman, and he thought that she had died, so he dragged her body into the corner. She's not dead. She's going into labor. She gets up and she starts screaming, and she's running, and blood is pouring out of her. She gets out, and she runs into a car that was abandoned in the parking lot and manages to start it. Not before giving birth in the car while Martin is trying to get into the car. She gives birth, and the baby comes out of her, and its head goes under the gas pedal, and she's so in a hurry to get out of there that she stomps on the baby's head, in her getaway attempt, which she is successful at. Martin goes back inside. He finds that the centipede has now split in half, so he has two 6-person centipedes, and they start attacking him. So he's freaking out, and he's like, no. So he starts killing them. He has a gun, and he starts shooting them. But then he runs out of bullets, so he starts slitting their throats. By the time he gets to the front of the centipede, which is the actress from the first film, he is so sad to do it. He runs his fingers through her hair one last time before she punches him in the nuts, and he falls over because he is in pain. She takes that funnel in which she force-fed him with and shoves it up his butt. And it should be noted that Martin brought his pet centipede with him to this little adventure, whatever you'd like to call it. So she takes his pet centipede and puts it in the funnel and drops it into him, and then throws away the funnel. And now he has a centipede inside of his rectum. And then he doesn't slit her throat, I believe. He just leaves her there to die. And then it cuts to him back at work, watching the human centipede again. He is fine. And the movie ends. So, again, this one's my favorite because it is so disgusting and over the top and vile. The third one is also over the top and vile and disgusting, but not in the same way. Which I'll get to that. But again, it's just really, it's interesting. So I guess now we'll talk about the mood/vibe of this one. It's all in black and white, and it's very high contrast. It's very artsy-fartsy, for lack of a better word. Like, it's trying to look avant-garde, but it's not. It's just really funny. And that can be noted by the silly British accents that everybody has, and the nature of the human centipede, which I think personally is a rather comedic concept, especially in the vein of like this like autistic mute little guy just really wants to make a human centipede himself, and he will stop at nothing to do that. So it's just funny. I don't know how else to explain it. It is so bloody. It's unbelievable, and I really like that. I really like gore. I really like all of that stuff. And just general, like, it looks really good, you know? That's why I like it. And again, it goes back to that nostalgia thing. I watched this at the same time that I watched the first one. I watched them back to back. And I remember where I was underwhelmed by the first one, I was overwhelmed by the second one, and I was like, wow, I have never seen anything like this before. I didn't even think that movies could do this. And it just, again, changed my life forever. I have seen this and the first one more times than I can count. Again, I can quote most of this film off the back of my hand. It had been a little bit since I had seen the second one, and I would just like to say that when I was watching the movie Centipede, when Martin first goes into the warehouse that he wants to make the centipede in, and the lights turn on and you see the space empty, I felt at home. I was like, hello, old friend. I don't know how else to explain it, but again, it's a cozy thing for me because I'm so familiar with the plot of it, and it's so like cartoonishly stupid that it's not grounded in reality in the slightest. The whole premise of the second one, in comparison to the... I'll get to that when I talk about the Conceptual Centipede, actually. But yeah, it's good. So then we get to the third centipede, the Human Centipede 3 final sequence. Now, this one's interesting. I like it. A lot of people don't like it. No, but a lot of people don't like any of these movies. But especially this one, and I can understand why. I would say this is my least favorite of the three, but it's still a really fun watch. It opens with the ending of the second one, and it pans out to the TV, and you see it being watched by none other than actor Dieter Lasser and Lawrence R. Harvey. Now, Dieter Lasser played Dr. Josef Heiter from the first film, and Lawrence R. Harvey is Martin from the second film. So now we have these two actors coming back, and they just watched presumably the first two movies. Now this one is chock full of fan service because it came out a little bit after the first two. And it is just not ashamed of what it is. So the plot here is that Bill Boss, played by Dieter Lasser, is a prison warden. And Dwight, wow, I forgot his last name. But Dwight, played by Lawrence R. Harvey, is his assistant and who really wants to really idolizes Bill Boss. Bill Boss is a really abusive, nasty, racist, just a bad person, the worst person you could ever imagine, this prison warden. And he abuses his prisoners, and he thinks that sodomizing all of them, or not sodomizing, sorry, castrating all of them is the solution to their problems. While Dwight is trying to convince him that that is not the way to fix the prison. The way to fix the prison is, in fact, to make a prison human centipede. And most of the film is Dwight just trying to convince Bill Boss of this, while Bill Boss just abuses everybody and calls them slurs and screams and hurts people. It's really violent. I don't think it's as violent as the second one, but it's a lot more crude and offensive. It's not for snowflakes, I think is how Tom Six would describe it. He would say it's not politically correct, which it's not. This is not a very... I think it's good that Dieter Lasser is dead now. As tragic as it is, he would not have survived the political climate of today. Not that the political climate of today is bad. Don't get it twisted. I think things are great right now. But I just mean his career would not have lasted very long post-pandemic. So, yeah, most of the movie is him just abusing his prisoners. And then finally, in the last third of the film, Dwight is like, would you just listen to me? He's got a really funny accent in this. And he invites, get this, he invites Tom Six, the director of the first two Human Centipede films, to Bill Boss's office, the prison, to convince Bill Boss that making the prison centipede is a good idea for the prison. So Tom Six plays himself in this movie, and it's really funny because he's Tom Six and he's not great at acting. And he just comes in and says the stuff that he says in like all of his interviews, where he's like, yeah, it's 100% medically possible and accurate, and I had the idea to make a human centipede when I thought of attaching a child molester to the anus of a fat truck driver, and he just like, he's like a soundboard, like you just press buttons and he says stuff. And he's in his funny suit and his funny hat. It's kind of awesome. So then finally Bill Boss is like, okay, let's do it. And so he shows the 2 human centipede films to all the prisoners, and then there's a big prison riot. And then the construction of the centipede begins. Which makes way for some more comedy. Bill Boss kills a man just because he's in a wheelchair, and he goes like, I don't have time for your vegetables, or whatever. Again, it's all very insensitive. He sticks his gun into somebody's colostomy, or stoma. He pulls his colostomy bag off and sticks the gun in the stoma and kills him because his anus is sewn shut. So of course he can't be part of the centipede. In that riot, the only female in the whole movie, his secretary Daisy, who he routinely sexually abuses throughout the whole film, gets like beaten up and she's in a coma. So what does Bill Boss do? She's in the hospital, the prison hospital. What does Bill Boss do to her in her coma? He rapes her. And yeah, the centipede gets built. Tom Six throws up at some point because it's even too much for the Pope of Filth. So yeah. And then in the last 10 minutes of the film, we see the centipede. And it's long. It's, I think, 122 people. It's long. And it's just, it doesn't do anything. It just stands there the whole time. And so Dwight and Bill Boss are trying to show the governor that this is a good idea, that they've like solved America's prison problem. And so they're bringing the governor around, and he's like, wow, this is bad. And we find out that Daisy, the secretary, because she was in the hospital, has accidentally been put into the centipede, and Dwight is like horrified because he's got a crush on her. And then I think one of the funniest parts of this is there's this like really slow like shot on the governor standing behind a fence, and then Bill Boss walks in and he's doing a stupid dance, and he's like, and here is what we do with the death row inmates and life sentences, and it like cuts to a slightly wider shot, and he's like, the human caterpillar, and it's all of their arms and legs get cut off, and they just get sewn ass to mouth in the same way, and they're just like laying in the dirt. It's hilarious. So yeah, and then at the end, the governor is first like, this is a horrible idea, you two are fired. So then Bill Boss kills his lead doctor in the prison and Dwight, because it was Dwight's idea. And then the governor comes back and he's like, actually, this is a good idea. And then the movie ends with Bill Boss in a guard tower, naked and screaming into a megaphone, while the national anthem plays, but it's like not quite the national anthem, and then it's over. Now, I forgot to tell you the color of the second movie. Gray, because it's all in black and white. The color of this movie is yellow. The whole movie is really yellow because it takes place in like a hot, nasty desert in America. So, yeah, this movie is really funny in a very overt way, where the second one's funny, but it's not trying to be funny. This one is trying to be funny, and I think it's successful. A lot of people don't think it's successful. I think it's funny because it's really over the top, and it's just so stupid and like pathetic, and the fact that like you don't even see the human centipede in this movie until the end of it, and it doesn't do any, like, it's not even about the centipede. It's funny, and it's just trying really hard to be offensive, and that's why I like it too, because it's just like, it's so tone deaf, and most of the movie just takes place in Bill Boss's office. Like, it's really weirdly structured. But what's interesting to note about this one is that this is the third one is what Tom Six envisioned for the human centipede all along. At least that's what he's said. And who am I to, think he's lying? But I think did I say that already? The first movie, they wouldn't let him make it unless he played it straight. So he played it straight. I did say that. But the third movie is what he wanted it to be all along, supposedly. So yeah. So now I will give my rating out of 5 for each. 5 out of 5 for the first one, 5 out of 5 for the second one, and 4.5 for the third one. Yeah. So now I'm going to talk about the Conceptual Centipede, which I've been kind of dangling over your head. And there's a couple of things that I want to touch on in regards to the Conceptual Centipede. I'll talk about the Conceptual Centipede as in the movie Centipede first. The reason this is called the movie Centipede, which it's kind of obvious, it's because it's all 3 movies front to back, front to back, front to back. But what I thought was so funny, by the time I finished, this was 4.5 hours long, and I watched it all the way through. So the third one ends, right? And this only happens on this. I don't think that, yeah. The third one ends, and it cuts to black. And then we see Dr. Joseph Heiter laying in bed, asleep, and he wakes up because he just had a dream. And he wakes up and he walks over to the cage that he kept his Rottweiler centipede in. And he walks away. And then the DVD loops. And then it starts over. It just restarts the movie. Because I just thought that was so funny. I thought that was hilarious. And Tom Six is a genius. He really is. It was so funny and awesome. And regarding the conceptual nature of the individual films, I think it's really interesting how it's like, if you really think about it, he's making, like, in the first one, they're making fun of the trope of, like, the stupid horror protagonist women, because I don't know, it's really interesting. He puts the 2 of them behind the Japanese man, who is A, a man, and B, doesn't speak English, so that immediately puts a power dynamic where like the two girls can understand him when he's speaking English, but he speaks German a lot of the time too. But they can't react. They can't say anything back because of the guy in the front, and the guy in the front doesn't speak any English, doesn't understand any English or German, and it's interesting. Um, it speaks to a really weird, like, I don't know. It's just interesting. And then he gives that really bizarre speech at the end, and yeah, I don't know. I and this is me just talking out of my ass a little bit. I kind of think that the first one is smarter than it lets on, and it's making fun of a lot of horror movie tropes, but also it's not. That's just what I want to believe. And again, the second one I think is interesting. Like I said, Martin is kind of like coded as being autistic, which is a revelation that I had upon this most recent viewing. But I don't know. And I think watching it back to back like this, you notice a lot of patterns where Martin is like directly trying to be exactly the same as Dr. Heiter in the first movie. But I think conceptually, the second movie is a reaction to the reaction to the first one, where the marketing and everything in the first one was it's 100% medically accurate, and it's clinical and cold and so on and so forth. And you had two camps with the reaction to that, where you had some people that were like, which a lot of people have this with like any horror movie, this is so stupid and crazy, this shouldn't exist because some crazy person's gonna watch this and want to do it themselves, because especially because this is medically accurate supposedly. And then there's other people that are like, this is stupid and underwhelming, and I don't care, it's just a dumb horror movie. And I wanted to watch something really gory with something called the Human Centipede. You would think it'd be crazy. So you compound those two reactions and make another film out, like based on those reactions. You get the narrative of that crazy person seeing it and wanting to do it themselves because it was medically accurate, but doing it very not medically accurately. Hence the tagline for the second film being 100% not medically accurate or medically inaccurate. I don't recall off the top of my head. But, and in addition to that, it is way more over the top than the first one in terms of gore and violence and profanity and so on. So I think those two are really nice companion pieces to one another. And then you get to the third one, and it kind of like blankets them, and it's kind of like a haha gotcha moment where it's like, I made this and this is how you reacted, but this is what I always wanted it to be. And so like I said, the third one was what he intended for the first one to be all along, and that was his thought with it, which I think makes a lot of sense when you look at how Tom Six markets and brands himself. He's very much like an edgelord satirist of sorts. You got to read his artist bio on his website. It's really funny. I wish I had that kind of audacity as a painter. He's a better painter than me just for his boldness in that regard. But in addition to that, I think it's very obvious that it is the third one is a critique of the U.S. prison system from the lens of a Dutch white man who has probably not lived in America very much. Not to say that our prisons are good; they're not good, but you know what I mean. Like, there's a weird distortion there, and again, it's really over the top. And it's in a desert, and I think it's really so. Bill Boss is a German immigrant who just like fetishizes America a lot, and he's bald. He's hairless, completely hairless. And there's this part towards the beginning where Dwight goes, "I even grew this stupid mustache to look like you," and he's got a toothbrush, like a Hitler mustache. What is that implying? You know what I'm saying? Um, it's just because then he rules the prison, you know, not good, very similarly to German people in the 1940s. I just thought that, I think that's funny. But yeah, so the third one blankets over the first two, and it's like, again, it's like a weird gotcha moment. I don't know. It's interesting. Um, and I guess if I were to rate the whole movie Centipede out of five, I would give it a five, just because it is so. I By the end of it, when it did that whole loop around thing, my mind was blown. I was like, this is so silly. I don't know. And again, it's because I love these movies a lot. I hold them really near and dear to my heart. Um, I want to get a DVD of the third film just so that I can be a completionist. I have the first two on DVD, as you have seen if you're a longtime viewer. But I also have a tattoo of a centipede, um, because of these movies. I know that sounds really silly because it is. I think that's funny, but that's why I have this. Will I ever tell anybody if they ask me what's the meaning of my centipede tattoo? Probably not. I'll probably just say I think centipedes are cool, and bugs are cool. But that is why I have a centipede tattoo, is because of the human centipede. And Tom Six, if you're watching this, I just want you to know that. Um, Maybe one day I'll get a tattoo of the actual one, but for right now, I'm not that crazy, and I need to maintain uh, stable employment and income. But once I've made it, the sky's the limit. Um, so yeah, that's the movie Centipede, and I'm so happy if you made it this far. Again, I don't know if I'm going to actually edit any footage or clips or pictures. I might edit pictures in just so you have some visual aid for those who've never seen these films. Um, and yeah, I love these movies, and I'm so happy to own this. It'd be really cool one day if I could get it autographed by Tom Six or Lawrence R. Harvey, or anyone really, except for Dieter Lasser because he's dead. Notably, I will say I've been to Kiel, Germany, which is the city in which Dieter Lasser was born, and I'll leave it at that. So yeah, remember to subscribe, smash that like button, hit the bell icon, and I'll see you guys next time.